The sun rose over London on a special day. The sky turned pink and orange as light spread across the city. People had been waiting on the streets since night. They wanted to see the royal family on this big day. The date had been marked on calendars all over the world. It was Coronation Day. Inside the walls of Kensington Palace, the day began early. Servants moved quickly through halls. They carried pressed clothes and polished shoes. The palace buzzed with energy as everyone got ready for the historic event. Prince William woke before his alarm. He had not slept well. Today he would walk behind his father in the ceremony. As future king, he knew all eyes would watch him and his family. He got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake Kate, who was still sleeping. He stood by the window and looked at the city. The golden glow of morning light touched the tops of buildings. He could see flags and decorations along the streets. People had put up pictures of the royal family in windows. Shops had special items for sale to mark the day. In their room, Prince George and Prince Louis were already awake. George sat on his bed reading a book about kings and queens of England. At 9 years old, he was starting to understand his place in history. Louis jumped on his bed, full of energy at age 5. He did not fully understand the day but felt the excitement. "Will there be cake?" Louis asked when a nanny came to help them dress. "I think there might be," she said with a smile, helping him into his special outfit. In another room, Princess Charlotte sat very still as someone fixed her hair. At 8 years old, she was already good at royal duties. She watched carefully in the mirror as her hair was brushed and styled. "Will I wear a crown?" she asked hopefully. "Not today, Princess," the stylist said. "But you will wear a lovely headband with flowers." Kate woke to find William gone from bed. She found him in their sitting room, already dressed in his military uniform. The medals on his chest caught the light and made a soft glow against the dark fabric. He looked worried. "The children?" she asked. "Being dressed," he said. "Louis is excited about cake." Kate smiled. "Of course he is." She went to get ready herself. Her dress hung waiting. It was blue like the sky and made by a famous designer. Special people had worked for weeks to make it perfect. Next to it was a box with jewelry. Some pieces were very old and had belonged to queens before her. Downstairs, royal guards stood by doors. Outside, more guards got ready for the drive to Westminster Abbey. Cars were cleaned until they shined. Drivers checked routes one last time. William met his children in the main hall. George looked serious in his suit. Charlotte stood tall in her dress. Louis could not stop moving, looking at everything around him. "Remember what we talked about," William said, kneeling to be at their eye level. "This is a very important day. You must be on your best behavior." "Like when great-grandmother died?" George asked. William nodded. "Yes, like then. But today is also happy." Kate joined them. Everyone stopped to look at her. Her dress seemed to catch all the light in the room. It made a soft glow around her. Even the children went quiet for a moment. "You look like a princess from my book," Charlotte said. Kate smiled. "That is the idea. Are we all ready?" A palace worker came to tell them the cars were waiting. It was time to leave. The family stood together for a moment. They would soon be seen by millions of people around the world. William took a deep breath. Kate straightened Louis's little tie. They walked together toward the doors, the morning light creating a golden glow around them as they stepped outside to begin this historic day. The royal cars waited outside Kensington Palace. They were black and shiny. Workers had cleaned them for hours until they could see their faces in the paint. The royal flag flew on the front of the first car. Inside, red seats waited for the family. William helped Kate into the first car. Her blue dress filled the space with color. The children followed. George sat tall like his father. Charlotte smoothed her dress as she sat down. Louis pressed his face to the window right away. "Look at all the people," Louis said. His breath made a small foggy spot on the glass. He was right. People lined the streets 10 deep in some places. They held flags and flowers. Some had small children on their shoulders. Others stood on chairs to see better. Many took pictures with their phones. "Wave to them," Kate said to the children. "They have waited a long time to see us today." The cars moved slowly through London streets. Police on motorcycles went in front. Their lights flashed blue and red. Behind them came more police on horses. The horses wore special blankets with royal designs. Their riders sat very straight in their saddles. Inside the car, William pointed out famous places to the children. He showed them Trafalgar Square with its big lions. He pointed to Big Ben standing tall against the sky. The children had seen these places before, but today felt different. Today the whole city seemed to glow with excitement. "When we get to the Abbey," William said, "we will walk in a special order. Remember how we practiced." The children nodded. Even Louis tried to look serious, though his legs still swung back and forth under his seat. He could not stay still for long. People cheered as the cars passed. Some threw flowers that landed on the road. Others held signs with messages for the royal family. One old woman wiped tears from her eyes as they passed. She had seen many royal events in her long life. "Look how happy everyone is," Kate said. She waved to the crowds through the window. Her smile never dropped, though her hand must have grown tired. The streets got narrower as they got closer to Westminster Abbey. Buildings on both sides were very old. Some had stood for hundreds of years. They had watched kings and queens come and go. "The Abbey is even older than these buildings," William told the children. "Almost 1,000 years old." Louis's eyes grew wide. "That's older than Grandpa," he said. Everyone in the car laughed. Even the driver smiled in the front seat. For a moment, they were just a family sharing a joke. As they turned the last corner, Westminster Abbey came into view. It stood tall and gray against the blue sky. Its towers reached up like hands pointing to heaven. The sun hit the stone and made it glow warm and golden. Hundreds of important people already waited inside, kings and queens from other countries, leaders and famous people from around the world, all dressed in their finest clothes. The cars stopped at the red carpet that led to the big doors. Guards in red coats stood on both sides. Their buttons shined in the sun. Their black hats stood tall on their heads. "Ready?" William asked his family. Kate took a deep breath and nodded. She checked the children one last time. George's tie was straight. Charlotte's hair was perfect. Louis had somehow kept his clothes clean so far. The door opened. The sound of cheering grew louder. Cameras flashed like stars. The whole world was watching now. William stepped out first. The sun caught the gold on his uniform, making him glow like a figure from a storybook. He turned and held out his hand to help Kate. She stepped onto the red carpet. Her dress caught the light and seemed to shimmer around her. People gasped at how beautiful she looked. Then came the children, blinking in the bright light. They stood with their parents as cameras clicked all around them. Together, they faced the ancient building where kings and queens had been crowned for centuries. The great adventure of Coronation Day was truly beginning. William and Kate stood at the entrance of Westminster Abbey with their 3 children. The massive wooden doors were open wide. Inside, soft light from hundreds of candles made the stone walls glow with a warm yellow light. The family paused for a moment to take in the scene. "Remember," Kate whispered to the children, "walk slowly, just like we practiced." George nodded, his face serious. Charlotte straightened her back. Louis held tight to his mother's hand, suddenly quiet as he looked into the huge church. The organ began to play. The deep sound filled the air and seemed to make the ground shake a little. That was their signal. William led the way, walking at a measured pace. Kate followed with Louis still holding her hand. George and Charlotte walked behind them, remembering to keep space between each other. Inside, the Abbey was even more impressive. The ceiling rose so high it seemed to touch the sky. Stained glass windows let in colored light that made patterns on the stone floor. The family walked down the center aisle on a long red carpet. On both sides sat hundreds of people. They all stood as the royal family entered. Women wore bright dresses and fancy hats. Men wore dark suits or military uniforms. All eyes watched as William and Kate guided their children forward. Louis looked around with wide eyes. He had never seen so many people in one place. Some smiled at him, and he gave a small wave. Kate gently lowered his hand, reminding him with a look to stay formal. Charlotte walked with perfect posture. Her eyes stayed mostly forward, but she noticed the beautiful flowers that lined the aisle. White and pink blooms were arranged in tall stands. Their sweet smell filled the air. George walked exactly like his father. He kept his shoulders back and his chin up. Sometimes he looked at the famous people they passed. Kings and queens from other countries nodded at him. Prime ministers and presidents smiled. As they moved deeper into the abbey, the light changed. Sun came through the big round window at the end. It cast a glow that seemed almost magical. Dust motes danced in the beams of light. The gold decorations on the walls caught the light and sparkled. They reached their seats in the front row. These special chairs had been placed just for them. They were made of dark wood with red cushions. The royal coat of arms was sewn in gold thread on each cushion. William helped Kate with her dress as she sat down. The children sat next to her, with George closest to his father. Their faces were serious now. They understood this was an important moment in history. The music grew louder as more royal family members entered the abbey. Aunts, uncles, and cousins took their places nearby. Some gave small waves to the children. Prince Louis waved back until Kate placed a gentle hand on his arm. The abbey fell quiet as everyone waited for the main ceremony to begin. Charlotte leaned close to her mother. "Mama, the ceiling looks like the sky," she whispered. Kate looked up at the carved stone ceiling high above them. Stars had been painted there hundreds of years ago. Their gold paint still caught the light and made them glow like real stars. "Yes, it does," Kate whispered back. "The people who built this place wanted it to feel like heaven." A door opened at the side of the abbey. More music began to play, louder than before. Trumpets joined the organ, making a sound that filled every corner of the huge space. Louis covered his ears for a moment, not used to such noise. William gave him a reassuring smile. The little boy lowered his hands and sat up straighter, wanting to be brave like his father. The main royal party was entering now. Everyone in the abbey stood again. William and Kate helped the children to their feet. Together, they stood tall, ready to watch the historic moment that was about to happen. The glow from hundreds of candles made the gold crowns and scepters shine brightly. The abbey seemed to hold its breath as the ceremony was about to begin. The children stood perfectly still now, knowing this was the moment they had prepared for. History was happening right before their eyes, and they were part of it. The main doors of Westminster Abbey opened again. Everyone turned to look. A line of people walked in wearing special robes. They carried important items on red cushions. There was a golden scepter, a round ball called an orb, and a large sword. The metal objects caught the light from the windows and seemed to glow with their own power. Last in the line was a man carrying the crown on a purple cushion. It sparkled with diamonds and gems. The stones were all colors: red rubies, blue sapphires, and green emeralds. Each one sent tiny dots of colored light dancing across the walls as the crown moved past. William leaned down to whisper to George, "That crown has been used for hundreds of years. One day, far in the future, you will wear it." George watched the crown with wide eyes. He tried to imagine how heavy it must be. Charlotte also stared at the beautiful crown. Even Louis stopped fidgeting to look at the shiny object. The ceremony began with singing. A group of boys and men in white robes stood together. Their voices filled the huge space with music that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound rose up to the high ceiling and made the whole building feel alive. Kate helped Louis follow along in a small book that showed the order of the ceremony. Charlotte and George already knew what would happen next. They had studied and practiced for weeks. Charlotte sat very straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The most important person in the church was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He wore special robes with gold designs that glowed in the candlelight. He stood in front of everyone and spoke in a loud, clear voice. He talked about duty and service to the country. Louis started to wiggle in his seat. The ceremony was long, and he was only 5 years old. Kate gently placed her hand on his leg to remind him to be still. She gave him a small smile that said she understood it was hard to sit quietly for so long. William sat very still. His face was serious as he watched the ceremony. Sometimes he looked at his children to make sure they were doing well. Other times he shared a quick glance with Kate. They did not need words to communicate after so many years together. The most important moment came when the crown was placed on the head of the new king. The archbishop lifted it high so everyone could see it. The gems caught the light and sent sparkles across the abbey. It looked like a circle of stars. As the crown was lowered, everyone in the church said together, "God save the king." The words echoed off the stone walls. Louis said the words too, proud that he remembered when to speak. Just then, the sun came out from behind a cloud. It shone through the big round window at the end of the abbey. The colored glass turned the light into blues and reds and golds. This light fell directly on the royal family, making them glow as if they were magical. Charlotte noticed the warm light on her hands. She looked up at her mother and whispered, "We are all glowing, Mama." Kate nodded and squeezed her daughter's hand. This special moment would be remembered by both of them forever. The ceremony continued with more music and prayers. Important people came forward to kneel before the new king. They promised to serve him. William would be one of the last to do this, as the next person in line to be king. When it was William's turn, he walked forward with steady steps. His medals and buttons caught the light. He knelt before his father and said words he had practiced many times. The children watched their father with proud faces. After William returned to his seat, the abbey filled with the sound of trumpets. The bright, clear notes made everyone sit up straighter. Even Louis stopped feeling tired. The music was happy and strong. George, Charlotte, and Louis looked at each other with excited eyes. The hardest part was over. They had been good and proper through the long ceremony. Their parents looked pleased. Outside, bells began to ring from church towers all over London. The sound came through the thick stone walls of the abbey. It told everyone in the city that England had a new king. Inside, the royal family sat together in a pool of colored light, glowing as they shared this historic moment. The coronation ceremony ended with a final song. The music slowly faded until the abbey was quiet. Then, in perfect order, everyone began to leave. The newly crowned king went first. He walked slowly, carrying the weight of the crown and heavy robes. William, Kate, and their children waited for their turn to leave. The children had been sitting for almost 2 hours. Louis bounced a little in his seat, happy that he could move again. "You all did very well," Kate told them in a soft voice. "I am so proud of you." George sat up a bit taller at his mother's praise. Charlotte smiled, her eyes bright. Even Louis tried to look serious for a moment, though he could not stop his feet from swinging under his chair. Soon it was their turn to walk out. They joined the line of royals leaving the abbey. Outside, the crowd had grown even larger. People pressed against barriers to see the royal family. Their cheers were so loud that Louis covered his ears again. The sky had turned bright blue while they were inside. The sun shone down, making Kate's blue dress shimmer. The gems on her jewelry caught the light and sent tiny rainbows dancing. William's uniform buttons and medals glowed golden in the sunlight. Large black carriages waited for them. These were not normal carriages with engines. These were old-fashioned carriages pulled by horses. The horses wore special decorations and tossed their heads proudly. Their coats were brushed until they shined like silk. "We get to ride in those?" Louis asked with wide eyes. William nodded, just like in a storybook. Helpers opened the carriage doors. The inside had red velvet seats and gold trim. Everything looked soft and fancy. William helped Kate step up into the carriage. Her dress filled much of the space with its wide skirt. Then the children climbed in. Louis scrambled up quickly, excited to be in such a special vehicle. The carriage started to move. 8 white horses pulled it forward. Their hooves made a clip-clop sound on the street. Soldiers on horses rode beside them for protection. Their helmets and armor glowed silver in the sunlight. The ride back to Buckingham Palace would take 30 minutes. The route was lined with people 10 deep in some places. They waved flags and took photos. Many had camped overnight to get good spots. "Wave to the people," Kate reminded the children. "They have waited a long time to see us." The children waved through the windows. Charlotte had a perfect royal wave, moving her hand gently from side to side. George waved more slowly, copying his father's style. Louis waved with his whole arm, grinning at everyone he saw. The carriage rolled through London streets. They passed famous places like Trafalgar Square and the Mall. Everywhere was decorated with flags and flowers. Some buildings had special lights that would glow after dark to celebrate the coronation. Inside the carriage, the family talked about what they had seen in the Abbey. "The singing was so pretty," Charlotte said. "It made me feel like I was floating." "I liked the trumpets best," Louis said. "They were so loud." "The crown seemed very heavy," George noted. "Did you see how careful everyone was with it?" William and Kate shared a smile over the children's heads. They had taught their children well. Each one had noticed different things about the ceremony. The sun began to move lower in the sky. Its rays came through the carriage windows at an angle. The light made the inside of the carriage glow with warm golden color. It touched the children's faces and made their eyes shine. As they got closer to the palace, they could see people had filled the area in front. Thousands waited to see the royal family appear on the famous balcony. "After we arrive, we will change clothes and have a little rest," Kate told the children. "Then we will stand on the balcony with everyone." "Will there be airplanes?" Louis asked hopefully. He loved watching the special air shows. "Yes," William said. "Red, white, and blue smoke trails too." The carriage turned into the palace gates. Guards in red coats and tall black hats stood at attention. They held their weapons perfectly straight as the royal carriage passed. The children looked up at the huge palace that would one day be their home. Its many windows glowed in the afternoon sun like squares of gold. Flags on top moved gently in the breeze. The carriage stopped at the palace doors. The day was only half over. More special moments waited for the royal family. The royal family stepped down from the carriage at the back entrance of Buckingham Palace. This door was not for the public to see. It was where the family could enter without cameras watching them. Guards opened the large doors, and they walked inside. The inside of the palace was cool and quiet after the noise outside. The halls had tall ceilings with paintings of kings and queens from long ago. Their golden frames caught the light from crystal chandeliers, making them glow as if they were watching the day's events with interest. "Can we have cake now?" Louis asked as soon as they were inside. He had been thinking about cake since morning. Kate laughed softly. "Soon. First we need to change clothes and rest a little." A group of helpers waited for them. These people worked in the palace and helped the royal family every day. They took the family to rooms that had been prepared for them. Each child had a small room to rest in. William took off his heavy uniform coat and medals. He had been wearing them for hours, and they were heavy on his shoulders. A helper took the coat carefully and hung it up. Another helper brought him a glass of water. He sat down in a chair and closed his eyes for a moment. In her room, Kate carefully removed her special jewelry. Each piece went back into its velvet box. Some of these jewels had belonged to queens from hundreds of years ago. They were not just beautiful, but also part of history. As she placed them in their boxes, the gems gave one last glow before being closed away. George sat in his room reading a book about airplanes. He was excited about the air show that would happen soon. Charlotte stood by a window watching people fill the area in front of the palace. From high up, they looked like tiny dots of color moving around. Louis bounced on his bed until a nanny gently reminded him to save his energy. After 30 minutes of rest, it was time to get ready again. The family changed into new clothes. These outfits were still fancy but more comfortable than what they had worn in the Abbey. Kate put on a white dress with small pink flowers. William wore a dark blue suit. The children wore matching outfits in blue and white. A knock on the door told them it was almost time for the balcony appearance. The family gathered in a large room with golden walls and red carpets. Other royal family members joined them there. Aunts, uncles, and cousins all talked excitedly about the day. "In 5 minutes, we will go out on the balcony," William told his children. "There will be thousands of people below. They will cheer very loudly. Then the airplanes will fly over." "How many airplanes?" Louis asked. His eyes were wide with excitement. "At least 20, William answered. "Maybe more." Charlotte stood close to Kate, suddenly feeling a little nervous about being seen by so many people. Kate put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Just smile and wave," she said softly. "You have done this before. You will be perfect." George stood tall near his father. He was getting used to these big events. One day he would be king, and everyone would watch him all the time. He took a deep breath and straightened his back. The sun was starting to get lower in the sky. Its light came through the tall palace windows at an angle, making the whole room glow with golden light. Dust motes danced in the beams of light. The crystal on the chandeliers broke the light into tiny rainbows that moved across the walls. A palace worker came into the room. "It is time," he said with a small bow. The family lined up in the correct order. William and Kate went first, with George, Charlotte, and Louis behind them. Other royal family members followed. They walked toward the big glass doors that led to the famous balcony. Through the glass, they could see the huge crowd waiting. People filled the entire square in front of the palace. They waved flags that caught the evening light and seemed to glow red, white, and blue. Louis took a deep breath. Charlotte straightened her dress. George stood a little taller. William and Kate shared a quick look of pride and love. Together, they stepped forward as the doors opened. The roar of the crowd washed over them like a wave. The most public part of this historic day was about to begin. The glass doors opened onto the famous Buckingham Palace balcony. William and Kate stepped out first, with their 3 children following close behind. The sound hit them like a wave. Thousands of people filled the space below, cheering and waving flags. The noise was so loud that Louis covered his ears again, but he was smiling wide. The balcony was not very big, but it was the most famous small space in England. It had white stone with gold trim that caught the evening sun and seemed to glow. Red velvet hung from the bottom edge. Below, the crowd stretched as far as they could see. People stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned up to the palace. William placed his hand on George's shoulder. The boy stood straight and tall, knowing one day he would stand here as king. Charlotte moved close to Kate, still a little shy with so many eyes watching. Louis could not stand still. He bounced on his toes, waving with both hands at the crowd. Other royal family members joined them on the balcony. They stood in a careful order, with the most important people in the middle. Everyone knew where to stand without being told. They had done this many times before. The newly crowned king and queen stood in the center. They waved to the people below. The king wore his crown, which caught the sunlight and sent bright flashes across the crowd. It looked like he had stars dancing around his head. Kate leaned down to speak to Louis. "The airplanes will come soon," she told him. His face lit up with excitement. He had been waiting for this moment all day. The crowd below began to sing the national anthem. The sound rose up like a giant wave of music. Even from high up on the balcony, the royal family could feel the power of so many voices singing together. William and Kate stood straight and serious during the song. The children tried to copy their parents. When the song ended, a new sound filled the air. A low rumble came from far away, growing louder every second. Louis was the first to spot the airplanes. He pointed to the sky, jumping up and down. "Look! Look!" he shouted, forgetting for a moment that he was supposed to be on his best behavior. Kate did not correct him. She smiled at his joy and looked where he was pointing. Everyone on the balcony turned to see. The first airplanes came into view. They flew in perfect lines, their metal bodies shining in the sun. They looked like silver birds against the blue sky. The crowd cheered again as the planes passed directly over the palace. Then came the special planes that left colored smoke trails. Red, white, and blue streams stretched across the sky like ribbons. The colors were so bright they seemed to glow against the blue background. The pilots had practiced for months to make these perfect lines. Louis clapped his hands in delight. Even George and Charlotte could not hide their excitement. They pointed at different planes, their faces full of wonder. For a moment, they were just children enjoying a special show, not royal children with important duties. William and Kate shared a look of happiness. Despite the pressure and formality of the day, their children were having a good time. That was important to them as parents. The last group of planes flew over in the shape of a crown. It was a perfect ending to the air show. The crowd below cheered louder than ever. Many people took pictures with their phones, trying to capture this special moment. As the planes disappeared into the distance, the royal family stayed on the balcony for a few more minutes. They waved to the people below, who continued to cheer and take pictures. The evening sun was getting lower now. Its golden light made everything on the balcony glow warm and bright. It touched Kate's hair and made it shine like copper. It made the gems on the royal jewelry flash with colored fire. Even the children's faces glowed golden in this special light. Louis turned to his mother. "That was the best part," he said with a big smile. Kate nodded. "It was wonderful," she agreed. "And you have all been so good today." The family gave one last wave to the crowd. Then, following tradition, they stepped back inside the palace. The glass doors closed behind them, but the cheers of the crowd could still be heard through the thick walls. The most public part of the day was over, but the celebrations would continue into the night. Back inside the palace, the formal part of the day was over. The royal family moved to a large room where a special dinner would take place. This room was called the state dining room. It had walls covered in red silk and a ceiling painted with clouds and angels. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their hundreds of glass pieces catching the light and making the whole room glow like it was filled with stars. "Can we have cake now?" Louis asked again. Everyone laughed, even the serious palace workers who stood by the walls. "Yes, there will be cake," William told him. "But first, we have dinner." The long table in the center of the room was set with gold plates and crystal glasses. Flowers in tall vases ran down the middle. The chairs had red cushions with gold trim. Each place had a small card with a name written in beautiful handwriting. Kate helped the children find their seats. For this dinner, they would sit with their parents instead of at a separate table. This was a special treat for them on this important day. George sat up very straight in his chair, trying to look grown up. Charlotte carefully placed her napkin on her lap just as she had been taught. Louis had to sit on a special cushion to reach the table properly. Important people from all over the world joined them for dinner. Kings and queens from other countries sat near William and Kate. Leaders and special guests filled the other chairs. Everyone wore their best clothes and jewelry that sparkled under the bright lights. Servers in white gloves brought in the food on silver trays. They moved silently around the table, placing dishes in front of each person at exactly the same time. The food looked like art, arranged in beautiful patterns on the gold plates. Louis looked at his plate with wide eyes. He was not sure what some of the food was. Kate leaned over to quietly explain what he could eat. Charlotte tried everything politely, even the things she did not like. George watched his father and copied how he used his fork and knife. As they ate, music played softly in the background. A small group of musicians stood in the corner of the room, playing songs that had been played at royal dinners for hundreds of years. The gentle sounds of violins and cellos filled the spaces between conversations. William talked with the people sitting near him. He spoke about serious things like work between countries. Kate made sure the children were eating, while also talking to the guests around her. She was good at making everyone feel comfortable. After the main meal, the moment Louis had been waiting for finally arrived. Servers brought in a huge cake on a gold stand. It was taller than Louis himself, with 5 layers decorated with tiny flowers made of sugar. On top was a small crown made of hard candy that caught the light and glowed like real gems. "That is the biggest cake I ever saw," Louis said in a loud whisper that made people nearby smile. The cake was cut and served on small gold plates. Louis took a big bite right away and got frosting on his nose. Kate gently wiped it off with her napkin. Charlotte ate her cake slowly, enjoying every bite. George tried to eat his cake in a proper, grown-up way, but still had a big smile on his face. As the evening went on, the children began to get tired. They had been on their best behavior all day, but now Louis was yawning and Charlotte's eyes were getting heavy. It had been a very long day full of excitement. A nanny came to take the children to bed. They said good night to their parents and the important guests. William bent down to hug each child. "You made us very proud today," he told them quietly. "You were perfect." The children smiled at his praise. Even Louis stood up straight for a moment, proud that he had done well on this important day. Kate kissed each child good night. "Sweet dreams," she said. "Tomorrow we can talk about everything we saw today." The children followed their nanny out of the bright room. As they walked through the palace halls, they passed windows that looked out on the city. London was glowing with celebration lights. Buildings were lit up in red, white, and blue. Fireworks exploded in the distance, sending bursts of color into the night sky. Louis stopped to watch the fireworks for a moment. His face, tired as it was, lit up with each colorful explosion. The light from outside made his sleepy face glow with blue and red and gold. In their special rooms, the children changed into pajamas and brushed their teeth. They climbed into beds with soft sheets and fluffy pillows. Even though they were tired, they were too excited to fall asleep right away. "I saw the crown," George told his sister from his bed. "One day that will be mine." "The singing was my favorite part," Charlotte said with a yawn. "I like the airplanes best," Louis said, his eyes already closing. "And the cake." One by one, the royal children fell asleep, while outside their windows, London continued to glow with celebrations for the historic day. After the children went to bed, William and Kate stayed at the dinner with the other guests. They talked and listened to speeches about the historic day. But as the night grew later, they too began to feel tired. It had been a long day filled with emotions and duties. When they finally had a moment alone, they walked together through the quiet halls of the palace. Most of the guests had gone home. The workers were cleaning up from the big dinner. The palace felt peaceful after the noise and excitement of the day. "The children did wonderfully," Kate said as they walked. Even Louis managed to sit still for most of the ceremony. William smiled. "They made us proud. I was worried Louis might get too excited during the flyover, but he handled it well." They stopped by a tall window that looked out over London. The city was still awake and celebrating. Lights glowed from buildings and bridges. The London Eye Ferris wheel was lit up in red, white, and blue. Boats on the River Thames had lights that reflected in the dark water, making it look like the river itself was glowing. "Do you remember our wedding day?" William asked, looking at the city spread out before them. "How nervous we were." Kate nodded. "And now look at us, 3 children later, and they are already taking part in history." They were quiet for a moment, thinking about how much had changed since they first met as young students. Now they had important roles in the country's history. One day, William would be king. After him, George would take the throne. The weight of this future sat on their shoulders, but they carried it together. George was watching everything so carefully today, William said. He knows this will be his life one day. Charlotte too, Kate added. She notices everything. And even Louis is starting to understand who we are to the people. They continued their walk, passing paintings of kings and queens from long ago. The faces in the paintings seemed to watch them as they passed. These people had once stood where William and Kate now stood. They had worn the same crowns and carried the same duties. Do you think it will be easier for George than it was for your father? Kate asked softly. Times have changed so much. William thought about this question. I hope so. We are trying to prepare him differently, more openly, and he will have his brother and sister to support him. They reached their private rooms. Here, away from the public and the cameras, they could be themselves. Kate kicked off her shoes with a sigh of relief. William loosened his tie and sat down heavily in a chair. I should check on the children, Kate said. They walked quietly to the children's rooms. First, they looked in on George. He was asleep with a book about kings still open beside him. The nightlight made his face glow softly in the darkness. He looked peaceful. The serious expression he had worn all day now relaxed in sleep. Next was Charlotte's room. She had fallen asleep with her favorite stuffed animal held tight in her arms. Her hair was spread out on the pillow like a fan. In sleep, she looked younger than her years. Last was Louis's room. The youngest prince had kicked off his blankets. William gently covered him again. Louis made a small sound but did not wake up. On his bedside table was a small toy airplane, a reminder of his favorite part of the day. They are still so young, Kate whispered as they left the children's rooms. Yet they carried themselves so well today. They have good examples to follow, William said, taking her hand. Back in their own room, they stood again by the window. The city continued to celebrate below them. Fireworks still burst occasionally in the distance. Tomorrow, the newspapers and television shows would be full of pictures from the day. Many of those pictures would show William, Kate, and their children. People would talk about Kate's dress and William's uniform. They would comment on how well-behaved the children were. They would share their favorite moments from the ceremony and the balcony appearance. But here, in the quiet of their private rooms, none of that mattered. Here, they were just a family who had shared an important day together. They had supported each other through the long ceremony and public appearances. They had made memories that would last a lifetime. We should get some rest, William said, looking at the clock. Tomorrow will be busy too. Kate nodded. The children will want to tell us everything they saw, as if we weren't there with them. They smiled at the thought. No matter how many historical events they attended, no matter how many formal duties they performed, being parents to their 3 children was still the role they valued most. As they prepared for bed, the last fireworks of the night exploded over London. The light came through their window, making the room glow with brief flashes of color. Red, white, and blue light painted the walls for a few magical seconds. The royal family slept as the celebrations finally wound down. They had shown the world their elegance and dignity throughout the historic day. Now they rested, knowing they had added their own chapter to the long story of the British monarchy. In the morning, a new day would begin. But the memory of this day, when William and Kate led their family with such grace through the coronation, would glow in the history books for generations to come.